Hi, before I start, the reason this video is so long is not because I have an axe to grind, but because I have some very fine jewellery to dismantle. This isn't like religion bashing, where you can just do it for 10 seconds and everyone agrees with you. This is some shit people actually believe in. It's very possible that more of your neighbours believe in it than don't. This is like God bashing in deepest bumfuck Texas. Except this isn't a religion about a book. It's a religion about a gender. Yeah. Okay, so I've danced with feminism in the past, toyed with it, teased it, but the time has come to finally actually fuck with it, because it seems to have begun to fuck with the American atheist community, and I've got a lot of love for those brave service persons, and I think it's sad that in the land of the free, even atheism is not immune to religious schisms. Right, so it's very important that you pay attention to and remember what I say next. What I'm attacking is feminism, not femininity, not women. Feminists. Women are hard-working, rational people. Feminists are spoiled fuckwits. But that's not fair either, actually. Feminism is the gynocentric pursuit of spoiled fuckwittery. It's the ideology I'm attacking, not the gender, because attacking the gender would make me guilty of the same crime as feminism. Make no mistake, feminism does not attack ideologies, it attacks men and masculinity itself, because there is no male ideology to attack, except that which was fabricated from whole cloth by feminists, namely patriarchy theory, the hypothesis that men have always insisted on doing all the dangerous work to spite the women, right? Rather than perhaps to preserve them. That's why the Y chromosome was formed in the first place, you see, because we all know how much a species thrives on in-group spite. Despite how very obviously batshit that is, people seem to believe it. And not only are the roots of this batshit tree invisible, its invisible fruit is being dangled in our faces every day. And strange fruit it is too. Lol. Speaking of which, you know what was the most typical reason they gave for hanging a black man from a tree? Rape. False rape. You want someone fast-tracked, you want someone proper Guantanamo'd with no trial, false rape it. The Julian Assange business was one of the straws that broke this particular camel's back. Every liberal hippie chick on the planet was all, oh, he's awesome, he's some kind of genius, he's the kind of person we need in the world. Go, Julian! And then one Swedish bimbo goes, well, there was this one time he didn't wear a condom. And the media machine churns out as he raped me, and each and every one of those pinko dickheads spins on a dime like a shockwave of startled flamingos and goes, oh, he's a rapist, definitely. Look at him, he's creepy, he's an egomaniac, I can't support his work at all. That is how easy it is to manipulate feminists en masse. The duplicitous, tyrannical superpower you were just railing against turns out to be one victimized female mascot away from being a beacon of benign justice. Believe me, feminists, I don't hate you. Just really don't want to see a world full of you. And the world appears to be inexplicably filling up with you. On these premises and others, I am attacking feminism, so as to defend masculinity, and indeed the future of civilization, from these corruptions and systemic attacks. That in no way, listen to me very carefully, that in no way makes me a misogynist. It makes me a dissenter of an ideology. And even if I were a misogynist, that would not defend feminism from any of the charges I'm raising. For the record, I hate all women and all men and all children and all animals. Love plants, though. Plants are awesome. Never had my day ruined by a plant. Unless I explicitly asked for it, in which case I've had some days spectacularly ruined by plants. Anyway, you can play this game with feminists. You can try and talk to them about their ideology, about feminism, about its flaws, about its deceptions. And see how long you can make that conversation go before you're accused of being a misogynist. Chalk up the lap time, right? And then see how long you can go before that's what the entire conversation is about. You, and what a misogynistic subhuman you are. They'll make it personal. They'll rake up your past. They'll concoct some quarter-assed Freudian sandpit theory about you. Because feminists don't have to talk objectively about feminism. They just have to character assassinate anyone who does. Doesn't matter how long you spend explaining to them what ad hominem is and why it's not an acceptable argument, they will hear none of it. It's actually a rather handy sort of acid test. If that never happens and you can have the whole conversation without it descending into name-calling, then you're golden. You have an open-minded person to talk to who just happens to have been fed the usual feminist lies. But when you find someone who won't even let you get through the word misandry without oinking at you like a dickhead, that's when you know you're dealing with a jackbooted drone who would sooner relinquish their reasoning abilities than reconsider for one moment their perceived genetic superiority. That's when you know you're dealing not just with an ideology that doesn't hold up to scrutiny, but a person who doesn't know how to use scrutiny for anyone's ends but their own. It's what Scientologists do. Try and talk to them about the well-documented crimes of their church, and before you can dot the I's, they're going, what about your crimes, suppressive person? Only a child rapist would be an SP, boo. It's the same test you can do with religious people of any kind. Question their ideology. See if they call you a moral atheist scum for doing so. Because that's when you can confidently conclude, religion or no religion, this one here is a twat. Although even creationists will eventually paint themselves into a corner and be left with nothing to say, but it's just my faith. I believe it because I believe it, not because of evidence. But with feminism, you never get this submission or any compromise whatsoever. It's just an ever-shrinking downward spiral into this maelstrom of vindictive bullshit. And all this, even though patriarchy theory is just as unsubstantiated and every bit as blatantly sexist as our old friend God up there. Not every feminist is crazy, just like not every religious believer is crazy. But just talk to them. Engage. You'll find out which ones are crazy by how long it takes your jaw to drop at what a nasty piece of work is hiding just beneath the surface. And it's a terrific early warning system. I don't like calling it a test, because it's really just a conversation. But it's a conversation that's in your best interest to have. Because if they fail to have this conversation like a civilized human being, there may be other things down the line that they fail to undergo like a civilized human being. Contrary to unpopular belief, women aren't crazy, or flustery, or irrational, in my tentative contention. However, people who have been told for their whole lives that they can do no wrong are more likely to become crazy, flustery, irrational, and most importantly, self-entitled. Parents usually do this to their children. Whether you're my little boy or you're my little girl, you're the most important person in the world and everything you do is awesome, squeeze! Douchebag explosion. Parents do this with true gender blindness. But feminism also does this, and only to women. And feminism has conned the state into helping it do this to women. Nowadays, as far as the state's concerned, if you're my little girl, you're weak, and you need protection and special treatment and compromise. But if you're my little boy, you're a violent, uneducatable rapist, and you're vicariously responsible for all of society's ills. Everyone believes this, but don't worry, it's physically impossible for anyone to hate you for it. Yeah, no, misandry does exist. Its name is feminism. I think two of the most widespread problems we have in the West are sexism and paedophilia. By which I mean feminism and child worship. It's as though someone, somewhere, around the turn of the 20th century, realised the world is going to end, and the ship is sinking, and sounded the final call of women and children first. We'll have two massive wars, kill off half the men, then when they get back we'll call them all rapists, and we'll... The 20th century was functionally an exercise in replacing every possible domestic responsibility with a machine, or a chemical machine, thereby ensuring that every woman is given the choice of a life catered to entirely by these machines, or if she prefers, she can get a job. Those doors will be opened for her at her behest. And who's building these domestic machines? Who's operating this conveyor belt of planned obsolescence? Mainly third world people of all kinds, but chipping in for the West is mainly men, with women helping with the admin if they feel like it. I'm going to let you absorb the rather insensitive way in which I just told the truth. I'm not going to throw any oppressive mathsy statistics or anything at you, but just look around the room you're in. Examine the objects you're looking at and try to picture the people who designed those objects, who slaved away at the drawing board, measuring the perfect ergonomic angles. Picture the people who constructed those objects, hammered all those straight lines into place. I'm not saying none of them were women. I'm saying more than half of them were men. And if you can take that on board, the truth is it is almost entirely men. To say the least, when feminists claim that women could do all this on their own without men, they're in a much less tenable position than would be a man who might claim the opposite, since the feminist making this claim is invariably sitting in an artificial cave designed and built by men with little or no help ever even offered from women. And it's not because men are forcing women not to help them build things. It's because men want to build things more than women want to build things. Because men are wired that way. And if you want to do some rewiring, it's certainly not helping that women are given every incentive to simply shit out a child and sit back and command the machines. Now is it? See, men can't get away with just simply sitting at home commanding the machines for their own amusement. Teenagers can, obviously, if they still have My Little Boy points, and tragic basement man babies can, if they still have My Little Boy points. But if they don't eventually start doing something for society, for the collective, they're considered worthless skivers. Now, the same can sometimes go for women, until they get pregnant. The moment a woman gets pregnant, Nanny von Statestein descends from the skies, floats her above the bubble garden, gives her the wings of omnipotence, and reads her the feminist equivalent of the Miranda rights. The Wirumanda rights, perhaps. You have the right to this child. You have the right to the provisions of the father you specify. If you do not specify a father, provisions will be supplied for you, care of the taxpayer. You have the right to remain childless. Anything you do say may be used against the father in an accusation of rape, sparing you any further sense of responsibility. He'll be left at best dead to his community forever, and at worst imprisoned for decades, and regularly raped. And what rights does Nanny read to the man in the event of a pregnancy? None. Yeah, he doesn't have any. He just points a gun at his head and goes, "Give her what she wants." Even if the lady in question stole your sperm from you. Even if she slipped you a roofie and a Viagra and raped you in a coma, she still gets to keep the sperm and whatever happens to it. And you can't be on the pill, remember? There isn't one for men. Why is that? It took them a couple of decades to create a female pill, and given how much simpler the male reproductive system is, we should have had a male pill by the 80s at the latest. But instead, we got generations of research into boner pills. Now, why would that be? Why, in a so-called man's world, is it only women who get a little white pill that prevents them getting raped into parenthood, while men only get more and more little blue pills that facilitate them getting raped into parenthood? Can you imagine a world in which men could privately switch their fertility on and off, and all they gave women was a pill that made them wet? That would sound a lot the fuck to me like a patriarchy, and it's the opposite of what we have. And still, to this day, it's legal to steal sperm. You can't steal water, you can't even steal air, really. You can't steal a single atom of carbon unless it's in one of the molecules that make up sperm. In fact, the only substance in the known universe that you can legally steal and keep happens to be the substance that contains a man's genetic code. So please, don't tell me that I don't know what it's like to live in a society that makes you feel worthless. My biological identity is worth less than the air you breathe. In fact, the inside of a vacuum chamber is probably worth more than my genetic identity. What I am is worth less than nothing. And as far as feminism is concerned, that's still too much. Only feminism can take the law of logical absolutes and then shatter it into infinite pieces, and then keep doing it. A equals A, nope. A equals B. A equals A equals. A equals. patriarch. These, by the way, are just some examples of rights and privileges that men do not have because they are men, but which women do have because they are women. The right to abstain from parenthood, the right to private, non-permanent contraception, the right to steal the genetic identity of the opposite sex. I'll carry on, shall I? The right to a gender-specific housing project, the right to a gender-specific shelter for victims of domestic abuse, the right to prosecute a female rapist, the right to due course, anonymity and presumption of innocence if accused of rape, the right to prosecute a false accuser of rape. Oh wait, women don't have that one either. Spectacular! The right to custody of one's children, of course, even in the event of an adulterous or mentally ill spouse. The right to unmutilated genitals. That one really sticks out, doesn't it? I'll come back to that. The right to be employed or enrolled in an institution in preference over an equal or more qualified candidate, purely on the grounds of your gender. The right not to spend the night in a jail cell if the police catch you being assaulted by a woman. Not making it up. The right to harmlessly express oneself sexually anywhere in public, let's face it. The right to go within 5 feet of any child, let's face it. The right to half of everything you own. I mean, I could go on. And I'm not saying women shouldn't have some of these rights. I'm saying men actually, presently, in this reality, don't have them. And it makes me laugh in your face when you talk about white male privilege. I am yet to hear a single example of a right men have in the West that women don't have. A right, mind you, not a function, not a bone structure, not a roll of the mitotic dice, a legally sanctioned right. Because I don't know anyone who's ever thought of one. You've got to feel for Western women. Can you imagine being the most privileged group ever in history, yet you're still convinced you're one of the least? To have all the bitter resentment of the lower classes combined with the atrophied resolution of the upper classes. I mean, it must be a living hell. Yeah, I don't care anymore. You often hear this one. What are women's reproductive rights compared with men's rights of getting to run the world? Well, that would be an awfully shrewd argument if you happen to be talking to the Crown Prince of Saudi fucking Arabia. A tiny fraction of men do the job of running the world. And it's not because they're men, it's because they are, or are of, crazy testosterone psychos who can't be stopped. Like Merkel, like Thatcher, like Bodicea. The vast majority of men don't have this condition. They are poor and vulnerable, and they are descended from an unbroken lineage of poor, vulnerable men. These are the men doing the suffering on behalf of the rich men and on behalf of the women and children. These are the men making noise in the men's rights movement. If the idea of feminism was to make life even shittier for poor, vulnerable men, then mission accomplished. If the idea was to bring down the evil white man, then I have some upsetting news for you. Not only has it not made a dent, feminism is right in the evil white man's wheelhouse. It fits him like a glove that fits 5 different continents of cock. Feminism gives the evil rich white man yet another way to enslave the fuck out of the poor, vulnerable, whatever race we can get hold of men. The history of civilization is the story of poor men getting fucked over by rich men to various ends. And then the 20th century came along, and women of all classes decided to join in the dog pile and start wailing on the poor men because they didn't know the difference, and apparently still don't. And nowadays, ordinary men don't get to run the world, and they don't get to run their families, and they don't even get to run their reproduction. You don't think that's an important difference compared with anything? Complete control over who gets to come into the world? Men are the ones not wanting children, but women are the ones having the unwanted children, choosing to have them. And we've done everything we can to tell them the difference between a human being and a blastocyst. Of course, to me, almost all children are unwanted. There are too many people. This is an uncontroversial fact. There are far more people than the world can handle. But no one's doing anything about it. No one's marketing a male pill. We're not getting a male pill. No one's recovering any of the sperm that women steal. And why not? Because swollen populations are profitable. Humans are like any other commodity. The more you have access to, the cheaper they are. Governments and corporations are fully aware that overpopulation is destroying the world, but they don't seem to care. They figure if they make enough money, they'll be big enough come the apocalypse to build their impenetrable doom fortresses and sit there sniping zombies till Jesus comes. Before you go back to that vomit I just kicked out of you, yes, these governments and corporations do have men in the driving seats, but just because they're run by men doesn't mean they're run for men. They do not operate in the interests of men, or of masculinity, or of patriarchy. They operate in the interests of profit. Profit is not a male phenomenon. Little Miss Diamonds are a girl's best friend. Profit is a blind, boundless evil. And if making profit means demonizing masculinity in the interests of femininity, then that is exactly what they will do, and have done, and very much do. Because the men in charge of governments and corporations are not, as I earlier hinted, ordinary men. They're not men at all, they're lizards! Of course, if profit means demonizing femininity in the interests of masculinity, they can't do it, because that's discrimination. Fortunately for the reptilians, profit never means that. The continuing tragicomedy of the Middle East is a testament to that. I have to tread carefully not to ring Godwin's bell here, but I find it dishearteningly bizarre that feminism is considered a left-wing ideology, when it could not be more definitively right-wing. Restricting one group for the benefit of another. Restricting the social freedom of individuals for the ultimate benefit of the economic freedom of the state. Textbook right-wing. As right-wing as the Taliban. Flipping over the gender doesn't flip over the wings. It's the same bullshit. Feminists will say, no, it's left-wing because we're giving more freedom to women. They deserve economic reparations from men because their corresponding ancestors didn't have the privilege of working themselves to death or being straight up killed in a war. It's the same as grudge racism, you know. Your grandfather hurt my grandmother, so I get to hurt you. That sort of thing. But in this case, it's your grandfather died, so I could be a single mother. And all the fucking sense that makes. Feminists claim they're not dragging men down, they're building women up. Well, do me a favour and look for some way of doing it that doesn't automatically pull the covers away from the men. You didn't make girls better at exams, you just marginalised the exams because that's the format in which boys excel. You didn't train women to compete on a level playing field with men, you just annexed half of the playing field and made it a man-free zone. You haven't helped women get over rape, you've just convinced them that everything men do is rape. You didn't give children better mothers, you just gave mothers more children. There's nothing left to give to women. There's nothing more we can do to build them up. They have the same rights as men, and then some more. So the only thing left for feminists to whinge about is the statistic that high-earning women earn, whatever it is, 5% less than high-earning men, or that most CEOs and world leaders are men. Never mind that men account for the landslide majority of suicides, of the homeless, of victims of violent crime, of 98% of workplace injuries, and as good as 100% of workplace casualties. Never mind the glaring fact that the poorest of the poor men are many, many, many times worse off than the poorest of the poor women. We have to address the matter of why rich women get paid slightly less than rich men for doing less work. This is the only point which could conceivably be a halfway, if I even do a halfway. I might not do a halfway, but if I do, goodbye and fuck off. Right. Okay, so let's do a thought experiment. Imagine feminism achieves all its stated goals, its currently stated goals, and women get exactly equal opportunities to men. What if that is the case, yet men still get the highest paying jobs? How would you explain that? Listen to the question. Listen to the question. Both men and women equal by definition. No corruption is possible. No oppression is possible. We're starting fresh. Men and women, exactly equal opportunities, yet men somehow still end up getting more of the highest paying jobs. What about that somehow there? How might you explain that somehow? Here's my first question. What were you expecting? Exactly 50-50? There are significant mechanical and neurological differences between these two groups. One wouldn't be surprised to see a less than round figure. Why should one group not land significantly proud of the 50-50 mark? Especially if that group has been biologically and neurologically honed to specialise in the acts of provision. If all things are otherwise equal and one group excels in the field of provision, perhaps that group is better suited to the field of provision. Now, what makes you think that this is not already the case? That there are already equal opportunities for men and women, and men are simply doing better with those opportunities because of the way they're wired. Now, if I could really offend your feelings with sharp and oppressive facts, you may have noticed, due to the elimination of the competition element from schooling practice and the mandatory enforcement of workplace gender quotas, finishing school is measurably easier for girls and finding work is measurably easier for women. Yet men still get the highest paying jobs. Men and women do not have equal opportunities. Women have more and better opportunities. What you are looking at when you see the pay gap and the overwhelming male presence in leadership positions is a minority of men continuing to excel despite being systematically discriminated against for their gender. Men play life in hard mode and they still win. Women play life in easy mode, and when they still can't win, they blame all the sexism in the fucking gaming community. Just like trying to have a constructive debate with a feminist is like playing chess against someone who thinks squares have 3 sides, and gets personally offended when you tell them they don't. Men may receive privileges for being rich, or for being charismatic, or for culturally ingrained nepotism, or men can increase their chances of finding work if they can keep themselves strong and smart and dependable. But they will never get any extra edge just for having a penis. Women will. You should be on Oprah if you've got a penis. As a woman, if you can find an employer that hasn't yet met gender quota, you can get a job by default just for having a vagina. While the man who works his whole life for that job can hop on his bike like a good little fish, or however the fuck that goes. You can be a 5 foot tall, 90-pound man who has trouble reading maps and one day might decide to be off sick with full pay for 9 months, and you will get no quarter. You will face all the same natural physical restrictions as a woman, but you will also face an array of unnatural political restrictions just for having a penis. And even if that penis was mutilated when you were born to the point that it's too painful to use, you're still considered an uncontrollable sex pervert by default. And if you're one of those men unfortunate enough to have had your dick chopped off by a woman and flushed down the toilet, not only will you be laughed at while your acquitted butcher is celebrated on primetime television, but you will still face all the restrictions that come with having a penis. Unless you reveal that you don't have one. And then you'll be done for indecent exposure. A crime for which you will still receive a harsher punishment than would a woman with a fully present and functioning vagina. And the restrictions that come with having a penis don't stop at your ability to get the job in the first place. Once you get the job and you're on site, you need to pretend your penis isn't there until further notice. If you say so much as "that's a smashing blouse you have on" to a female co-worker, you could very well get sacked. Because if she thinks about you in a sexual way, and you can be seen to be held in any way responsible for her thoughts, she gets to complain about sexual harassment, even if she's 3 times your size. Of course, if she fancies you, it's a different story. If she likes the idea of stealing your sperm, you can talk about her tits all day and get away with it, because the rules only count when women say they do. The problem is, completely contrary to incredibly popular belief, that it is very much women who feel threatened by men. For reasons that are solidly rooted in cave people days, but highly toxic and disruptive in modern operations. But we act like the only solution is to make men less threatening. Sometimes the solution might be to teach women the difference between a threat and a fellow human being. Sometimes a little from both columns, why not? When women enter mainly male sectors, they are in a minority, and that along with the cautionary wiring up here, may explain their feelings of threat, but it should not excuse them. If you feel threatened and there is no threat, you're the one with the problem. But that's not how the system sees it. The system always sees men as the problem. There are some sectors and some courses in which perhaps only 2 of the female candidates can do as well as 98 of the male ones. But if someone complains enough on those women's behalves, they can get 48 of those men replaced with 48 women who did not try anything like as hard as those men, or those original 2 women. The opposite of this never happens. It's not allowed to happen. The vast majority of school teachers, for instance, are women. But anyone who suggests replacing any of those women with less qualified male teachers would be shouted out of the room for trying to oppress women. And in this lucid but fictional instance, the charge would actually be justified for once, because that actually would be discrimination by gender. Of course, the NSPCC has sucked all the tactile warmth from our schools, and now kids know what a paedophile is, so any man trying to become a teacher, even with the noblest of intentions, is practically volunteering his name for the sex offenders list, so it never happens. Half of the child abuse continues to happen under no suspicion at all because the perpetrators happen to be female, but that's another horror story altogether. The point is, we accept that women are simply better at teaching children. They're more suited to it. They're more wired for it. Just like there are a lot of admin roles and a lot of medical roles and a lot of legal roles in which women naturally excel over men. Men have no problem accepting that. Even the masculinists have no problem. Oh wait, those don't exist. But feminists refuse to entertain, even for a moment, the possibility that men might be better at some things. When women outperform men, it's because men are useless. When men outperform women, it's because men are repressive. You can't win, ever. And you sort of see, in a way, why feminists think like this, or why they profess this. Because they're deeply pissed off with the unavoidable observation that men might just maybe be better at more things than women. It sounds old-fashioned, but that doesn't make it untrue. The IQ bell curve is flatter and wider for men than for women. Although 100 is the average for both, men's curve stretches out further in both directions, meaning most of the stupidest people are men, but most of the smartest people are men. And you can see why this pisses women off, because they're in the middle. It's like being told you're mediocre, but it's not like that. Women are more built to nest, to create a controllable space to solve patterned compound difficulties. Men are more built to hunt, to conquer an uncontrolled space, to solve creative, adaptive difficulties. And in cave people days, these were equally important and varied specialities. But now that we have civilization and overpopulation, provision is still extremely varied and more important than ever, but nesting is kind of reduced to this docile commanding of domestic machines, and human childbirth is the biggest environmental disaster this planet has ever faced, including all the fucking meteors. So I'm not denying we need a massive overhaul in gender politics, but we're gonna need some slack on both sides, please. We moved way too far in one direction and the whole shebang is toppling over. Shebang. Focus. Speaking of cave people, right? Whenever cavemen saw a confusing threat, what did they do? Typically. They beat it with sticks. They pummeled at it until it no longer seemed threatening. Now, we're working very hard on muzzling that instinct, punishing men for it accordingly, trying to reassure them that there's no need to feel threatened. And we've made excellent progress when you look at history. Now, what about cave women? What do they do when they see a confusing threat? They scream at the men until something gets done about it. You'll notice this. Whenever you see 2 youths fighting, there's always at least one girl at the scene making a noise indistinguishable from a rhesus monkey. As though one of the fighters is going to go, "Oh, hold on, time out, old chap. This lady's trying to speak. What's that, my darling? Stop! Oh, heavens! You'd better stop. It's a good thing you've screamed that at the top of your lungs, but I must say, my dear, a lesser man might have found that shit a little bit fucking disorientating." Remember this before you go calling anyone a caveman. Remember what the equivalent is. When men throw their fists around in situations where it solves nothing, they are being cavemen. And when your lives as women are easier, longer, and reportedly more content than men's lives, yet you're still screaming at them for less than no reason, you are a fucking cave woman stuck out of time. You're a pre-monolith she-chimp Your only weapon is noise, and you think everyone is attacking you. You are barely more equipped to deal with civilized society than is a constipated baby. It's what women do, just as much as mindless violence is what men do. Which is to say, both genders do it, but one is more likely to do it. Just like it's a caveman's instinct to territorially lose his shit over a large pair of jiggling tits, it's a cave woman's instinct to consistently indulge her attraction to complete dickheads and the having of their dickhead children. But no one's working on muzzling women's cave people instincts. No one's trying to reassure women that there's no need to feel threatened. Very far from it. No one's admonishing them for just screaming at men to solve all their made-up problems. Why not? Because when women feel threatened, they are, that's right, profitable. They instinctively reach out for help, for goods, for attention, or just for some kind of compliance. When men feel threatened, they act on their caveman instincts and either go with fight and go to prison for it, or flight. They hunker down in a bunker, they distance themselves from the outside world and focus on a labour of love. While women prefer to focus on a love of labour. Men aren't profitable when they feel threatened. They don't buy, they don't consume, but they do buy and consume when they feel threatening, because they don't know how to deal with that on their own. You find you need a lot of help trying to appear less threatening when you were never trying to appear threatening in the first place. Fear can sell anything to women, but guilt can sell anything to men. A man trying hard to appear unthreatening does what? He white knights, he toadies, he buys gifts, he scrubs himself up, he is as submissive as possible. All the things that make a cave woman sneer to both ears, fart in his face, and then go skipping away to the nearest dominating, overprotective, already material-obsessed asshole, whereupon she develops an inadequacy complex and needs to buy consumer products to feel better. Both genders on their treadmills, everyone wins except the nice people, which is still most people, by the way. It really is mental that feminism has found a way to hate nice guys. They've developed a sort of plug-in, copy-pasted hypothesis that scoffs whenever they hear the expression nice guy. And it's not just the guys who lie about being nice, it's the guys who actually are nice. Even they only actually think they're nice for sinister, misogynistic reasons. They're only nice because they feel entitled to have you by being nice. I'm not exaggerating. Listen to them talk. They'll say this shit. What is this but a picture of people looking absolutely anywhere for shit to complain about? Men are incapable of genuine niceness. Especially the genuinely nice ones. I mean, even the fucking Nazis didn't... No, that's a Godwin. That is a Godwin. That is a Godwin. Oh, never mind. But it's no exaggeration at all to say that what we are dealing with is a form of right-wing oppression. And not just run-of-the-mill despotism. Despotism stops what is within reason. But when demands go above and beyond the call of reason, with a chaotic and impossible upward trajectory, what you have is called totalitarianism. And look at what we have. Nothing is good enough for feminists. Nothing will ever be good enough for feminists as long as they have to cohabit with men. As long as they have to be reminded that they're sharing a space with an other whose very existence makes them feel scared and offended. You will hear from talking to them how readily they will abandon their reason and their self-awareness at all costs just to try and restrict and diminish men, or just a man. There is only one word for this, and it is hate. It's more than misandry, it's feminine hate. It hurts far more than just men. You can give me all that misandry doesn't exist shtick, but feminism definitely does exist, and it sure as fuck quacks like a duck. 50 years ago, you might have had a case for saying feminism is about helping women, not hindering men. But honestly, after 50 years of doing nothing but hindering men, that is off the fucking table. What you have here is, and evidently always was, a hate group. The benevolence of the women's movement began and ended with the suffragettes, whose biggest hurdles, incidentally, were not to melt the hearts of male chauvinists, but to convince women that the vote would not lead to a draft. And, of course, to convince rich women to include poor women in the vote. Since then, all we've had is feminism. And feminism is not even the same species as the suffragette movement. It is a supremacist cult doing whatever it takes to push men aside and out of the house and demanding they be kept on governmental leashes through which all of their assets and identities can be siphoned. So feminism is at best a flawed ideology, and at worst a disorder. Feminism at its worst, and frankly at its average, is hate. And having hate for any specific genetic category of human is, to me, a disorder. Hate is always a disorder unless it's directed usefully against parasites or parasitic entities. If you're now thinking, but men do act like parasites on women, then I've run out of kind of cacophonic analogies to describe just how hateful a person you are, and how resonant the hateful symptoms of feminism are with a parasitic disorder. Dan Dennett, philosopher extraordinaire, has talked over the years a lot about religion as a natural phenomenon. When you look at religion as though it is its own entity, like a virus, but made of social code instead of genetic code, you begin to see what's happening. The religion is coded to act in its own interests, at whatever cost to its adherents. A religion has a greater chance of survival if it keeps its followers happy, but an even greater chance of survival if it keeps its followers just pissed off enough that some of them will kill for it, or die for it, or both. And really, every ideology, ultimately, is geared up to do that, to splinter into a malevolent strain that strangles all the benign strains. Even atheism. Atheism, if given doctrinal status, will indeed probably land us in an apocalyptic world of sea otters riding ostriches. That's sort of why I avoid calling myself an atheist. Wherever possible, I try to phrase it as, I'm not a theist. But if I lived in Oklahoma, the atheism label might be a necessary galvanizing tool. Feminism is perhaps similar. As a cultural counterweight, it might be a handy motivator if you happen to live in Somalia. But if treated as universal doctrine, it will destroy the world. And in the West, feminism is being treated as universal doctrine, and it is destroying the world. It's as right-wing as you can get, but it's treated as though it's as left-wing as you can get. They've got every base covered except this little island in the middle called reason. And as the American atheist community is witnessing, even that tiny offshore bastion of hope and freedom is beginning to get shelled. When I learned about the sheer extent of religion's negative influence on the world, I went on an anti-religion kick, which I'm still largely on, in this sort of gallant hope that we could save the world from it. But the more I learn about feminism, just how fucked up it is, yet just how deep in its fangs are, the more it makes me think this is actually unwinnable. This might actually be the human species uncorrectably fucking up. That's why it took me so long and so much research to form an argument that hit enough of the bases. And even in these 40, 50 something minutes, I've barely given you the tip of the iceberg, honestly. And this is all just petty doom preaching, of course. If you want a solution, I've already mentioned it. Develop a male contraceptive pill. Market a male contraceptive pill. Please, stop insulting us by saying we can't be trusted to take it, or not enough of us will take it. Bull the fuck shit! It would outnumber the female pill overnight, guaranteed. It would be like a ring. Makes women unable to marry you. We wouldn't even need it on the NHS. Fuck it, we've had to pay for condoms all these years. We pay out the arse for a pill. Even literally. And if this utopia came, if men had their pill, then in a generation's time, you could watch those acres and acres of residential tower blocks littering the country. Those cold, concrete barracks of orc cages, as the legions of single mother families that inhabit them grow up, move out, and thrive in the green and pleasant land left behind in the smouldering socket of the populational cyst removal that was the dawn of the age of the male pill. Ask any men's rights activist and they'll tell you if they only had one demand met, it would be for the male pill. No question. It would solve absolutely everything from the bottom up. And if, after decades of begging for it, men still haven't got it, what does that tell you about the patriarchy, about the system rigged in men's favour? Well, perhaps one thing to consider is that a poor, claustrophobic upbringing from a man-hating single mother is the perfect set of conditions in which to grow boys into potential soldiers and girls into more potential soldier-producing units. I've said too much. No, I haven't. They're grooming us to invade China! Probably should have cut it there, I don't know. I say we, of course. We. I'm barely affected by any of this. I'm too medically broken to be drafted into the inevitable Third World War. And I'm too aesthetically revolting for any of these sexual laws to even apply to me. I'm already resigned to a life of crying alone in dark corners, pretending to come in my own mouth. What about me, eh? Have you made it this far without achieving the certainty that I'm a misogynistic piece of shit? Well, why wouldn't I be? I am a straight, white, tall, lower middle class male. Everyone tells me I'll get a complimentary buffet of exclusive privileges coming my way. Well, it must have rolled through town while I was at work. I'm still waiting to see at least one right or privilege I get from any of these circumstantial distinctions. Although there is one, I suppose. I have the privilege of knowing that I am only ever accepted for my abilities. Only ever praised according to my deeds. Not my gender, not my race, not my appearance. Just the content of my contributions. When I get a job, I know it's because I was the best candidate. I will never be there because of a quota. I won't be blinkered by the training wheels of partiality. I will not be spoiled by the state. I will have to make my own way. As an adult, I mean. As a child, you get to stay in the bubble garden with the minorities and the women. But as soon as you're legally an independent man, you just have all your privileges confiscated. You're abandoned in the wilderness with nothing but your wits. That is the only privilege to being a straight white male in the West. You get the band-aid ripped off quickly. You get pushed into the freezing ocean head first and given no choice but to teach yourself to swim. We don't whinge about discrimination. We sharpen our claws on its manacles. We exercise our muscles as we struggle to escape them. Now that's not really a privilege, but you could call it an advantage. So feminists will probably find a way to outlaw that as well. It's not fair. Why can't women have the privilege of being discriminated against? This is They'll make it work. I've no idea how, but they'll find a way to think it. Men shouldn't be allowed all this adversity. They should be penalised for not being penalised. No, they should be penalised for being too penalised. They should be... This shit sounds too daft for a person to say, but it's exactly the kind of bullshit only a feminist can pull off. Remember how feminism operates. It doesn't stop, no matter what. A feminist can stand atop a mountain of men she has just murdered and then begin complaining that she can't afford to live this long. If feminists could get every newborn baby boy and inject them with special steroids that inhibit muscle and bone growth and testosterone levels, they would do it in a heartbeat and claim it was discrimination against women that we haven't been doing all along. Does that sound far-fetched? Does it? Given what they've got away with? Given that, even though the mutilation of a baby girl's genitals is quite rightly considered an abhorrent and unforgivable crime for which its perpetrator should go to prison for life regardless of their poxy religion, yet, for some reason, the exact equivalent has happened to a billion with a B, baby boys alive today. And it is considered perfectly fucking acceptable. And by the way, even Christopher Hitchens was wrong about this, and Hitch was never one to dance with wrongness. He used to say the genital mutilation community is entirely religious. No, Hitch. It sure is not. Only Jews and Muslims do it for religious reasons. Most American males, for instance, have been circumcised, and it's nothing to do with religion, and it's nothing to do with necessary surgery. It is entirely a cosmetic choice, an aesthetic choice. And it's not one made by fathers. It is a craze that has taken off among mothers in hot pursuit of the rise of feminism. As an American male, you are more likely than not to have your newborn baby penis mutilated forever so that it can look nice and sexy for mommy. Now, I'm a pretty sick guy. But even I could not, in my most wired, furied, sadomasochistic fever nightmares, think of anything creepier than that. But it happens to hundreds of millions of babies. And it's considered completely normal. And no doubt, most of the women who do this to their sons will go all the way to their graves screeching about the sexual devaluation and systemic gendered violence that only women have to put up with. Do you need any more evidence that feminism is not just every bit as hysterical and useless as a religion, but every bit as effective at actively doing harm to and continuously escalating the suffering of individuals, families, businesses, communities, countries on a massive scale? You may be asking how I can blame all this on feminism, on what I call feminism. Well, whatever you want to call it. Gynocentrism, male disposability, the age of totalitarian chivalry, whatever it is out there that's giving Western women every ridiculous thing they want while simultaneously telling them that they never get what they want, and doing immeasurable damage to poor vulnerable men and boys and newborn babies. But the flag being flown is called feminism. When a woman advocates the disturbingly popular idea of male genocide, and she calls herself a feminist, then you, with your perfectly reasonable belief that women need more help to be equal, and your perfectly healthy desire to raise a family without a father, with your perfectly ordinary fear that half the population are rapists, and your perfectly ordinary certainty that the other half definitely aren't, you are in the same position as a moderate Muslim watching the news about the latest victims of jihad, jittering through ill-concealed flop sweat that Islam is a religion of peace. It is not. Like feminism, it is a deliberately divisive cult based on myths, bogus prosecution complexes, and a resentful fear of normal human behaviour. So if you're still here, you're still listening to me, and you've hammered your finger on the dislike button less than 100 times, and no part of your argument contains words to the effect of "this is a misogynist vendetta," then there is hope for the future of your mental clarity. But I must warn you, the juggernaut may leave without you. While you were listening to me, you got stranded on this toy car, this second-round burnout from the pilot episode of Robot Wars. You may not like it here. And when it comes to apostates, these people are every bit as malicious as your average supremacist cult. And they get to act with complete impunity. So I'm not telling you to publicly abandon your association with the term feminist. That often proves more trouble than it's worth. I'm just describing to you, warts and all, how there is no word a man can say, no concept a man can evoke, that is more concisely coarse with sexism, with toxic, destructive prejudice than the term feminism. And if that leaves a bad taste in your mouth, then I'm sorry, but it was there the whole time. For your generation and several before it. And I, for one, have been wondering what the hell the smell was. I got weirdly assonant. I think that means I'm winding up. I mean down. Goodbye and fuck off.